Your time is important to us, and your approximate wait time is 30 seconds. I'm going to take a moment to thank my patrons here with their video. I do need to add a few to them, and I'll mention those in a second. Hey guys, howdy, howdy, howdy. How are you all doing? You guys doing all right? Let me see. So today we are talking about Ehlers Danlos. And so this was a regular one topic in the poll. And so I thought we could knock this one out of the park today. Let me see if I can find the chat. There you guys are. How you doing? How you doing? So let's go ahead and hit on what it is that we're going to talk about today. All right. So Ehlers Danlos. This is a pretty hefty type of topic. It's really heavy on some sciencey things, but that's all right. Good morning, Cersei. So, Cersei is one of my patrons. Doc Fearsome, you one of my patrons too. Thank you so much for being in here. So, I'm a day late, but that's all right. That's okay. So, we're still going to talk about our stuff, the Ehlers Danlos. So, what we're going to talk about is what is it? You know, what is it? Symptoms, risks, treatments, that sort of thing. You whistle it all the time. So that's what we're going to talk about a bit. Some of you guys, I guess right here is all right. I need to get like a really good way to just kind of put my chat, you know, and then but we just move it around. You no idea what it is. So you get to learn something today, Nether 6. So this will be pretty cool. So what are we talking about? And you noticed before I had the zebra thing going on. That's kind of like the symbol for people. For the Ehlers Danlos Society, they use the zebra. That's kind of like their mascot. So that's where I got that from, if you're curious. And so what the breakdown is with this particular disease, it's primarily skin and joints. Skin and joints tend to be affected. There are some other things associated with that, and we'll get into it. It can be inherited. So essentially, it's a genetic type of disease. You have EDS type 3. Interesting to see about what you're discussing. Awesome. So what I'm going to get into are I am going to talk about the 13 subtypes, and that's primarily determined by genetic testing. It can vary in genetic cause and manifestation. So there are always, I see always learning with you, Mel. Well, thank you, Nether. So there are 13 subtypes. Now, it can vary in genetic cause, meaning different genes are affected, and they're all they're various different variant genes. I won't get into each individual gene that's affected. What you really need to understand with that is that when they mean by variant gene, there's a gene there that usually codes for a particular protein. That gene is the one that's affected, so that protein isn't manufactured by the body so well. It's either missing this particular protein, or that protein is put together in not a good, solid, functioning protein. That's what they mean by variant gene. And it can manifest differently in people. And so the criteria is set for the subtype in diagnosing that. So they can look at your symptoms, but genetic testing is extremely important for them to understand exactly which one of the 13 you have. And symptoms vary from person to person. My case was brought up at a conference of all the orthopedic surgeons, and it was decided that my ligaments must be collagen deficit. Would this be a case of EDS? I would think so. It could be a possibility of that, but there's other factors. They really need to do a genetic testing thing to see if you actually have that variant gene, because those particular criteria are pretty solid. And so if you have that variant gene and it's manifesting differently in you, that could be why it was brought up at a conference. So, what I'm going to talk about, let's see if I got, that's the wrong one. Here's the screen. We got it. Boom. Here we go. So, what are we talking about when we're talking about Ehlers Danlos? And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Ehlers Danlos. Well, the website, the Ehlers Danlos Society, has a wonderful website that goes into what EDS is. Now, I'm pulling a lot of information from that particular website, as I found it to be quite a useful resource. I'm also talking a bit about stuff that I've found on the Mayo Clinic, as well as on NIH and PubMed. And I have those particular websites. I can direct you to them at the end of the talk. Now, before we get into the subtypes, because there are 13 different types of EDS, we need a little review on genetics, and as that is how they are fully diagnosed. Now, inheritance patterns are important to understand, especially if you have the variant gene for the EDS subtype. So we're going to talk for a minute about what's called autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. And so that way you can kind of get an idea a bit on how these particular things are transmitted. So yes, awesome. So let's see. Let me go here. We got that here. I can pop you guys here. All right, so autosomal dominant. So if you don't remember your high school biology, that's all right. We're going to knock it out of the park today. Autosomal dominant. What that means is you have a copy of a gene that's considered a dominant trait. That means you only need one copy of this gene in order for it to be to manifest in you, that what that particular gene programs, well, what that gene codes for. So in this particular graphic we have here, and this is from NIH, so they're a really, really, really good website. That's the U.S. National Library of Medicine division of NIH. All right. So if you have a copy of the gene and it's considered autosomal dominant, that means that gene is going to express. You don't need two copies. Now, how we inherit genes, we get a set of genes from a mom and a set of genes from a dad. They come together. So if it's autosomal dominant, that gene, even if you have a normal copy, you could have a normal copy of the gene or from your mom. If you have the variant gene in an autosomal dominant form of EDS, it's going to show. It's going to be louder than that recessive normal. Normal is considered recessive to it, so that's going to be silenced. And the autosomal dominant, the affected variant gene, is going to present itself. Setting up my new phone right now, but listening. That's okay. Welcome, guys. Welcome. So if you have a copy of the gene, it's going to show up. And so potentials for children. So if you go to it, and it's really highly recommended if EDS runs in your family, to go and get genetic testing so you can kind of determine, all right, what's it going to look like with the kids. And so in here, in these particular outcomes, you have a 50-50 shot. You have a 50% chance of passing that autosomal dominant variant gene onto your kids if it's one of those. All right. Now, if it's a recessive version of EDS, let's see what that looks like. This is what recessive looks like. Okay. So in this particular form of EDS, and there's different versions. There's autosomal dominant and there's autosomal recessive. So we're kind of going through and talking about what that means. So if you have a recessive version of EDS, one of the variant genes that are recessive, where the normal gene silences the recessive one, all right, then you can expect to, not have a manifestation of that particular gene. The normal is louder than the variant, so the normal one's going to show up. Now, if both parents happen to have a copy of the recessive gene, then you run the possibility of having a child that carries the EDS. So you have a good chance of it's 25% chance that your child will actually have that gene. If one parent does not have the gene, the variant gene, and the other parent does, there's no chance that your child will get both copies. So that's how that works. That's why genetic testing is exceedingly important, especially for people who have EDS, and they want to have children. So it's something to kind of consider. All right. So now that we've talked a little bit about the difference between autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant. Dominant, you only need one copy of the gene to show up. Recessive, you need both for it to show up. All right. Just want to make certain we understand a little bit about how that works. So let's talk about the 13 subtypes. And I'm going to make me a little bit smaller. All right. Here are the 13 subtypes of EDS. And I'm going to go through these with you and what each one kind of is. And then also keep in mind, there's a lot of overlap on symptoms. So you can have symptoms that could be all of these different types because it's a spectrum, they can have a variation on how pronounced those symptoms are. So it's exceedingly important that if you have EDS, or your doctor suspects that, you get that genetic testing so they can isolate which subtype that you have. Now, there's various different types of technology, but there's one particular type of genetic testing where they can run several tests to see if you have the gene at the same time. That saves a bit of time, and it's easier to rule out which subtype you don't have. My dad doesn't have genes. Oh my goodness. We're not talking about Levi's or Wrangler here. So, or Lee. I don't even buy name brand jeans because the cotton is, I'm not built for 100% cotton jeans. I have to have the stretchy, That's how I am. So let's talk about the different types. We have classical. Now notice I have AD and AR next to these various different ones. AD means autosomal dominant. AR means autosomal recessive. So autosomal dominant means you need only one copy of this particular gene in order to have it manifest within you. Autosomal recessive means you need both copies of this gene. All right, so we've got classical, we've got classical-like, we've got cardiac valvular, we've got vascular hypermobile, dermatosparaxis, we've got kyphoscoliotic. I don't say words very well sometimes, so I apologize in advance for my terribleness in trying to pronounce some of these words. Brittle cornea syndrome, that's easy to say. So dysplastic, I think that's dysplastic. Spondylodysplastic. I think that would be probably how you would see that. Musculocontractual, myopathic, and periodontal. What's interesting about myopathic is it can be either autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. Okay, Cersei says 23andMe. 23andMe can now add specialized genetic diseases in their tests for extra. Well, that's awesome. Do keep in mind with 23andMe, if you don't want them to keep your particular genetic information, you can opt out for them to use it in research with that, so that they automatically assume that you opt in, so you have to go and make certain you opt out for that. It's something that I learned. Can you test for each of these types, or are there some there is no test for? They have, it's the genetics is solid, so you can test for all of 13 of the subtypes because they've isolated what the variant gene looks like. So if you have the variant gene, essentially what that is, they know what the normal gene is supposed to look like. And it codes for a particular protein. It could be collagen, for example. So there are different genes that affect collagen production. So if you have a variant gene of one of those, it tends to be isolated to specific subtypes of EDS. So yes, they can test for these subtypes specifically for that. I have done multiplex PCRs back in 2008, and we could test for 19 markers simultaneously. Yes, you recently applied for a job with a company that produces chips that can test for 256 at once. Man, PCR is great. It's hard to get tested as adult due to lack of availability. Children can get tested quicker. Well, that's interesting information. Well, and also that's good to know. So lack of availability. Is that lack of availability of testing, of organizations? EDS stands for Ehlers Danlos syndrome. Now, for these particular subtypes, most of the time, and I'm going to throw the symptoms up here for you, what you tend to see. There's a lot of symptoms, so let's have a look at the symptoms. Now, keep in mind, these symptoms can overlap with one another. They absolutely can overlap with one another. I'm going to move you guys over here as we go through these different symptoms. So you have hypermobility. That means the ability to overextend your joints. And so you can kind of see it manifest in fingers and in wrists. So they're able to overextend their joints really, really far. So that's kind of what hypermobility is. You tend to see weak muscle tone, particularly in children. You start to see that early on. So it's when you see toddlers trying to walk, they have a hard time. They can have joint dislocation. There's chronic pain associated with this. For the more particular life-threatening ones, like the cardiac, valvular, and also the vascular EDS, you have the potential of blood vessel rupture. So what that means is that your blood vessels could actually burst, which could lead to a very life-threatening situation because you could bleed to death internally. Yes, many facilities don't have the resources to test, like in Oregon. You had to test in Tacoma, Washington. Wow. Okay. There's soft, velvety skin. And so sometimes when you have the lack of collagen, they have like super stretchy skin to where they're able to pull really far. This also makes them prone to bruise easily. And because of the blood vessel rupture, that means they also can bruise pretty easily. And especially with the capillaries, because that's kind of where we see like on the top of the skin. There's also abnormal scarring, which they call cigarette paper scarring, where essentially what happens is whenever they have a wound and it starts to heal, it doesn't close completely, so you see like this really thin cigarette paper like type of scar over time. So there's this abnormal scarring that's associated with that loose skin I mentioned due to problems with collagen production. You can have spine curvature with that scoliotic version of EDS, where it can worsen over time. So it tends to curve their spine in such a way. You can imagine that's pretty freaking painful. Eye abnormalities, that brittle cornea that can manifest in having this clear coat around their eyeballs. They can have permanently bent joints. And with the periodontal one, you might have seen that word before, periodontitis or where essentially it's like your teeth and gums. So you can have abnormal teeth and abnormal gums. But keep in mind, all of these can overlap between the various types of EDS. Same appearance with paper-thin skin for pregnancy or rapid weight loss. Wow, yeah. So that really thin, soft, papery, type of skin wouldn't even be hard to overcome if not for the effed up U.S. health system. FedExing samples can get you test results in 2 days at minimal cost here in Europe. Man, yeah, we really do need a national healthcare system in the U.S. It shouldn't bankrupt people to get life-saving medications and treatments. It really shouldn't. But that's where we're at right now. So these are all of the different symptoms. Now, it is important to remember that symptoms can range and are a spectrum. But depending on the type of EDS a person has, certain symptoms are more pronounced than others. But like I said, they can absolutely overlap, and often they do. It's not just one particular type of EDS. I mean, one particular symptom is like, oh, I only just have the blood vessel rupture. That's not usually how EDS works. They usually have several different symptoms that overlap. Now, when we're talking about EDS, a definitive diagnosis of type can only really come from genetic testing to see if a person has the variant gene that would affect the protein produced by that gene. Doctors can make a diagnosis based on symptoms. However, molecular diagnosis, genetic testing essentially, is necessary to determine which subtype a person has in order to effectively determine which course of treatment is necessary. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is an exceedingly rare disease. Less than 200,000 people in the U.S. each year are diagnosed with EDS. So that's very, very small in number. So it is considered kind of a rare type of disease. Let's see, we can't have a functioning health system. We have billionaires that need to sustain their profit margins to upkeep their many yachts and villas. Yeah, well, I have lots of comments on that, but this is where we're at right now. So back on topic with EDS. So I have a pretty neat graphic. It's a little bit so we can kind of see what this looks like. So I'm going to have you guys have a look at my big monitor. All right. So this particular one, there's lots of different infographics that are available for EDS. It's an inheritable disorder. It's caused by defects in the collagen structural protein. So we see that structural protein is kind of gives us our springiness to our skin. It's also needed for our joints. It was first described as Ehlers in 1901 and Danlos in 1908. There's an incidence of 1 in 5,000 live births where you see EDS. These are some of the classic symptoms where they have the loose skin, hypermobile joints. You also have joint degeneration, so joints break down over time. They're slow to heal. It can affect blood vessels, skin, bones, joints, and what we call connective tissues. So connective tissues essentially are everything that connects you together. So we see bones is a type of connecting different parts of you together. But you can also have connective tissue associated with your organs, like hearts. So some types are exceedingly life-threatening. The cardiac valvular is one. Vascular is another. So if your valves fail on your heart, or if you have issues with your blood vessels, this could be life-threatening. They look at your history clinical examination, and lab tests. It's mostly primarily genetic. Treatment looks at symptoms because there's not a cure. You need to use braces and protective clothing in order to help maintain your joints so they don't break them down. And genetic counseling is highly recommended in order to determine your ability to pass it on to your children. So, posting from Twitter has lagged. That's okay. More are starting to get diagnosed instead of fibromyalgia. Well, that's good. At least they're narrowing it down and not, and people say misdiagnosis. But if symptoms present a certain way, you can have all of the symptoms of a particular thing. This is why genetic testing is exceedingly important in order to make a solid, definitive diagnosis of EDS. Let's see. Off track. It's okay. All right. Happy East Star. And to you. So we're talking about EDS. Back on track here. What are the treatments associated with that? Well, it's actually pretty standard. What we see when we're dealing with EDS. Here we go. What they treat are the symptoms. They cannot, there isn't a cure. There are clinical trials and clinical tests, treatments where they're always doing more work and more research to try to figure out, how to handle these types of symptoms. So you often see pain medication. They also do blood pressure medication, particularly for those with the vascular version of EDS. You can also have blood pressure issues associated with the other forms of EDS. Physical therapy is exceedingly important in order to help build up some of that muscle strength to support a lot of the joints that are affected by EDS. And in some cases, or in a lot of cases, surgery, especially when you have joint degradation, you have to replace that with something. So knees, that would be one thing, especially if you have it in your knees. There's surgery is going to be highly individual to the person. Certain areas might be affected more than others. So it's more of a symptomatic set of treatments because there is no cure. There's no cure for EDS. So that's kind of what they treat are the symptoms. So doctors, it's exceedingly important for them to know which type of EDS you have so they're able to kind of predict what kind of outcomes are coming from the manifestation of your EDS. So that's kind of what we're looking at. They do the best that they can. So much like you can't really cure a cold, you treat the symptoms. Hello, Steve. You just you have to. You just try to make people comfortable and try to minimize the damage associated with their manifestation of EDS. All right. Hello, catching up on the chat. If you have questions, that's why I do the live stream, so you can ask me. And if if you are watching this later on and you have a question, hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up in the comments. Send me your questions, and I'll help you and answer any questions that you have. All right, so we're still trucking right along with EDS, guys. Now, as far as outcomes, lifespans tend to be shortened in individuals with EDS. The median life expectancy is approximately 48 years, but that's considering all types of EDS. It can vary with individuals, and that's one of those things. The median isn't necessarily what an individual's outcome is. It can vary largely, especially depending on how the EDS is manifested. So if your symptoms are minimal, that's going to affect the outcome. They do usually expect a major event to happen with many of those who suffer from various types of EDS by the age of 40. Life expectancy, of course, can shift depending on the type of EDS. Vascular EDS tends to affect blood vessels directly. Thus, it is exceedingly important that your doctor has a solid diagnosis through genetic testing. And that's in order to inform your doctor about what the potential risks are of, and give you as much information as possible on how you can minimize any particular damaging events from happening to you. Another option for EDS patients is in the form of clinical trials. The EDS Society website is wonderful in that it offers resources for patients, friends, and family of those with EDS. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this particular, I took a little screen video of what the website looks like, and I'm going to show you here in a second. Let's see, let me catch up on the chat. My knee has degenerated to the stage where I'll be having a hinged knee joint replacement next month. Oh goodness. Well, I wish you the best on that, Mark. I hope your surgery goes well. My setup is annoying. Okay. I learned the other day that actress Jamila Jamil of The Good Place has Ehlers Danlos. It's important that we raise awareness in that we can learn more about it. And you know, you might encounter somebody who has it. And so it's always more, you know, education is always exceedingly important in order to kind of knock this out. Let's see. All right, so yeah, best of luck to Mark on that. All right, so I'm going to show you a little bit of what we have here. Let me make, there we go. I'm just going to go to the big monitor and show you guys this way. So here is the EDS website. And I just kind of took a moment and just scrolling through. And you can kind of see what information is available there. They have a place for passing, those who have passed, support groups, printable materials, a helpline, webinars to give you more information about it. You can volunteer. You can submit photos to kind of raise awareness on EDS. They have resources for people who are affected by Ehlers Danlos. The social media and message boards are there as well. They have support groups. All of these particular ones, this website is amazing, and it's Ehlers Danlos Society. They have and this is part of their community resources, and they also link to current research, news, and events. So you too can kind of hop in and get involved in your own way. All right, their Facebook group is great too. Well, that's good to know. So let me see. Steve Bowden, yes. So you're looking forward to it. You should be pain-free after suffering for 25 years. Well, I hope you are. The Baltimore EDS Study Center is fairly new and is focusing on trial studies, so that's good. And so that's one of the things, you can get involved in a trial study. So it's just stay abreast of the new information that comes out each bit. And that website, they update it, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So I'm catching up on everything. Alrighty. So let's get back on track. Alrighty. So EDS can often be an invisible disease. Do you know a YouTuber named Insects Are Cool? She's an entomologist and new to YouTube, and I wonder if you'd like to do a collaboration with her about bugs. Absolutely, Doc. I would love to do a collaboration with bugs. I've actually worked with insects, worked on the Tree of Life project, and helped map the genome of the ladybug. So I have a little bit to contribute to that. So yeah, tell her to hit me up on Twitter, and we can do a collaboration. I love doing sciencey stuff. It's great. All right, so back to the topic. EDS can often be an invisible disease. It is important to remember that it is a spectrum on symptoms, as they can vary by individual. Doctors, as well as family and friends of those with EDS, are urged to not make assumptions on a person's pain and symptoms. Default to kindness and understand that just because you can't see their pain does not mean it's absent. Check the EDS Society's webpage and learn more about the types of EDS and how you can get involved in raising awareness and donating. They're learning stuff all the time about EDS, so that's really, really good. Since it's so rare, a lot of people don't understand, and they don't even know about it. They don't even know that it's a thing. So it's important to kind of educate yourself and kind of go about it. Why do some people call ladybugs by ladybirds? I don't know. So I'm not certain. So I'm going to take a moment to show you my sources. I wish I had a ton of more information about it, but we can do that. So there's Ehlers Danlos Danlos.com. That's the EDS Society. You can look on NIH. NIH is another good one, and they have Ehlers Danlos syndrome, so check out NIH. They have all the updated information on how they diagnose. The Mayo Clinic, it's very brief, the information they have there, but if you want to dive into more of the science stuff, Ehlers Danlos gets into the particular genes that are affected and what protein it affects. The NIH website is still easy to read. RareDiseases.org. They've got really good statistics and information on Ehlers Danlos, and also in regard to vascular EDS, you can check out NIH, and this was a PubMed particular article. So what I would do in order to get there, if you don't want to have to type in all this, and don't worry, I'll put this on my website, and you can download the slides and use them and how you need. So, hello? Hey, can you hold 1 second? I'm gonna cut off this stream, so I'm just gonna put the phone down for just 1 second. Okay? Okay, hold on. And so, that kind of just wraps up what we have here. Wait a second. I've got the wrong screen. There we go. Okay. So let me go through, find any other questions quickly. Their full name is Ladybird Beetle. Oh, no problem, Doc. Yeah, just let me know. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. So essentially, what I have talked about today is this. I've talked about Ehlers Danlos, what it is, its symptoms, its risks, and its treatments. We've covered that today. We've also talked about what the breakdown is, how the skin and joints are affected, that it's inherited, it varies in its genetic cause and manifestation. There are 13 subtypes determined by genetic testing. The criteria is set for the subtype, and symptoms can vary individually. Here's where you can find me. ScientistMel.com, that's where I put all of my resources. Patreon.com/ScientistMel. If you could buy me a coffee every month, that'd be great. Hey, Derp State, how you doing? I'm on Periscope, YouTube.com/ScientistMel, Facebook, and on Twitch. All right, so my new patrons, Mark Sykes, the Derp State, Rhetoric Discourse, and Brian, I'm going to update you guys in the video. So I'm going to kind of leave it here for a minute and hop on here by saying this. You always make each day special for me. You know how? By just your being you. I gotta go run because there's something that's going on right now and I gotta take care of it. So I'm gonna thank you guys for being here. Check me out next Saturday, and we'll be talking about the science of love. Thank you guys for being here and have a fantastic day. Talk to you later. Bye. Okay, hang on, let me How are you? What's happening?